print a check, if it looks like this, or what looks like that, it's going to give me a message saying I can't get a next unique number because I've restricted the length and I've maxed it out. So you'd have to come into your checkbook and bump it up or start over with new check numbers, or whatever you want to do there. So you are kind of limited here. But this is where you start your next check number. So if you've been doing manually reconciliation, or you've got an outside system where you're doing things outside of Great Plains and then you decide to bring it in, this is where you're going to start setting up your information to start using GP for bank rec. Then you've got some other fields, company address. This would be an address that you pick that's set up in the company that you're logged in. Your bank account number. This is not encrypted, so if you don't want to put that in there, that's fine, or you restrict access to this window, so people that don't need to see that information don't get that information. Bank ID, these are just banks that you've set up that you might do business with. It will have like their address, transit numbers, phone numbers. So it's basically the bank information tied to this checkbook. These are not required fields, so no big deal there. Here's my user-defined 2 that I called account type. It's just a string field, but it gives me, another field to track something that I want to. You might want to restrict a report. User-defined 1 throughout Great Plains is typically a restriction or a sort field when you're doing reporting. So if I wanted to generate a checkbook register or something off of that user-defined one, it is a key field for restricting on reports. The current checkbook balance, that's just going to be updated as I post transactions to my checkbook. Same with the cash account balance. As I post transactions and this account gets updated for this checkbook, my balance is going to change here. I can't manually change those. However, since this would be a new checkbook for us, and I wanted to start using GP to track this account, I would reconcile it through the end of whatever month you're going to move it over to GP. So let's say I have a statement for July 30th. I go through and I reconcile it with whatever method I'm doing now. And then here you put the ending statement balance from your last statement that you have reconciled outside of Great Plains. So, I don't know. And once I've put that in there, it doesn't affect the general ledger or anything like that. But now I've got a so-called beginning or cutoff balance to start with. And you'd only do this for, like I say, new checkbooks that you're setting up. Your beginning balance might be 0. It might be a brand new account. But if you're moving one from an outside system into GP, you'd want to put your your last statement balance in there. So we're ready to go August 1st in this scenario. The last reconciled date will automatically increment. You can type it in here only at the very beginning. These 2 fields are going to be disabled once you do your first reconciliation of this checkbook. So you're not going to be able to manually plug those in anymore. So that's only at the very beginning. There are some payables options on your checkbook. Maximum check amount. So if you want to restrict a user from cutting a check, or you can put an amount there. It's going to only affect checks on the fly. So if you're familiar with Great Plains, that's a check within the transaction entry window. The select check process, when you're doing your weekly batch, it's not going to affect that. It's only for the check on the fly. And I could also, if I don't put a password, it's not allowed. But if I do put a password, you're going to be able to see it here. So again, this window probably want to, secure so that not all the users are going in there. They could just grab the password and enter it in and cut a check over $2 million. Probably not a good thing. Okay. Duplicate check numbers. Typically, you leave that unmarked. There have been cases, maybe you have had a posting interruption or something, and you've had to come back into this window and mark to allow duplicate numbers so you get the batch to go through. But typically, you would leave it unmarked. You can also choose whether the payable, when you're doing the payables, whether they can overwrite the check number in the window. If I unmark it, my print check window comes up, and it shows me my next check number, but it's disabled. So in case I've got pre-printed stock, and it's really not the next number, maybe somebody came in and pulled one out of your drawer because they need to go handwrite something to make a purchase, I don't know. You're not going to be able to overwrite that. So kind of up to you whether you want to allow that function. Okay. As you can see, we can inactivate a checkbook. So maybe you close accounts with one bank and you're moving to another one. If you inactivate, you can still reconcile it. You can still void transactions that are posted to it. You just can't do any new transactions. So once it's inactive, tomorrow I can't cut a check against it. But the transactions that have already flowed through to it are available for you to still work with. Do we have any questions on how to set up a checkbook? Pretty straightforward.
What's the EFT bank and the direct deposit?
And that would be for a different module. There's EFT payables, there's EFT receivables, there's direct deposit for payroll. So if you have those modules, you would set that information up on the checkbook. But as far as bank rec, Okay, so there's our new checkbook we just set up. Oh, I have multi-currency registered, so I've got to pick one. Okay. So, I get several calls on this, so I figured I would throw this in on a slide. It is in the help menu, so you'll be able to find it, or on your principal manuals online, and I'll show you those if you're not familiar with those. But if you're looking at your checkbook and the checkbook balance says one number and the cash account says another number, probably in a perfect world, if everything was posted and you took that snapshot, those numbers should both match. But there's a different kind of transactions here, and when the general ledger and the checkbook balance actually gets updated. So if we go through and just look at this really quick, if you're entering a bank transaction for a check, withdrawal, or an increase and decrease adjustment, it will update your general ledger and the checkbook balance at the same time. If you're doing a bank transaction entry and you're entering a receipt, doesn't matter for cash, check, or credit card, and that is really a bank card in Great Plains. It's going to update the general ledger at that point. When you do the bank deposit entry window for any receipts, deposit with receipts or without receipts, or clear unused receipts, the two are going to update your checkbook balance. Clear unused receipts is going to throw a 0 deposit into your checkbook. So any receipts coming from any other module, accounts receivable, or entered within bank rec, you're going to see in the deposit window, and we'll take a look at that. And as we batch up those receipts to get a deposit for like a daily deposit total, that's when your checkbook gets updated. So there's a lot of times when you're looking at your checkbook balance and you may have posted receipts, cash receipts out there that haven't been grouped up and deposited. It hasn't updated your checkbook balance yet. Miscellaneous checks, bank transfers, and any adjustments that you do in the reconciliation window, they update both at the same time. So really, the only thing that may have a timing difference as far as updating the general ledger and your checkbook balance would be your cash receipts and your deposits. Okay. Any questions on that? Quite clear? Foggy? All right. Okay, let's look at the different kind of transactions now that we've been discussing them a little bit. Let's go into the bank transaction window. Now this is where I'm going to enter any transaction that's not, that affects my cash account or my checkbook, that's not vendor related, employee related, customer related, because all of those are going to flow from those submodules. So if I've got other AR, tax refund, you know, or somebody gives you money for some supplies they bought and you don't want to cut them, you know, they're refunding you something or giving you money back and they're not a vendor or customer, you haven't billed them for it, or, you know, that kind of a thing. This is all for your other AR as well. So the different options that you have, and if you'll notice, there is no batch ID here. So you know how everything, you know, you usually save into a batch. Bank transactions you post as you go. So there's no batch saving and trying it, you know, posting it later. You just post it and go. So we can either enter a transaction, enter a receipt, or we can void a transaction or void a receipt. So the ones that you want to void are transactions that were entered in this window. You can. The system allows you to void a check in here that came from AP, but it's not going to write back to AP. So you would want to void it in AP and let it roll forward. So if we do a transaction, our types change a little bit here. So I've got a check option. Here's my wire transfer because I changed that in the bank setup. Bank rec setup, because that's what we use that for all the time. Increase adjustment or decrease adjustment. If I did a check,